I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
Well, it is World Cup season. The World Cup being hosted in North America this year. A bunch of games in the States, some in Canada, some in Mexico. And we decided to kind of jump on that and do our own World Cup episode. And there are many football, soccer-related movies that we could have done. But we're going with Bend It Like Beckham, the 2002 Fox Searchlight Pictures movie. And we kind of mentioned this movie about a month ago when we did Star Wars Episode 1, because you had mentioned, Kiki, I believe this was the first movie that you can actually remember seeing Keira Knightley in.
Yeah, because I did not know who she was when I saw her in Episode 1, because I did not realize that was not Natalie Portman. So this was the first movie that I think I saw her in. And then, there would be Love Actually and Pirates of the Caribbean right after that. But was this a first watch for you?
Yes, I thought that I had seen this before, but I have not. So this was kind of a first watch for me in terms of like, maybe I've seen clips or something, but as far as the entire movie, this was a first watch for me.
Okay. Well, let me tell you how I first saw this movie, okay? I have kind of a interesting history with the football that is soccer. Like I have said many times, I come from a southern town where the football that is football is really big.
American football.
But yeah, at the time this movie came out in 2002, the football that is soccer, not really that big in the U.S. Now, when I was in high school, I had some family friends who played soccer, and that was very unusual in this area. We had just gotten some youth and school soccer teams. Okay. It was kind of new in this area. And a family friend of mine, their family was very big into soccer. Their kids played soccer and stuff. And it was the first family I knew that was really into soccer. Okay. One thing led to another, and they ended up recommending me for my first paying job, which was for my high school, where I would go and film the high school soccer games so that the coach and the players could watch it back and see what they did right, what they did wrong, etc. So I would sit on top of the press box and film all the soccer games. And that was my first paying job in high school. I knew nothing about soccer. All I knew was follow the ball with the camera. I did not understand the rules. I understood nothing. I just knew follow the ball with the camera. When this movie came out, I only knew David Beckham, the film's namesake, as some soccer player that Posh Spice married.
Same. And that actually was a point of contention for releasing this movie in the States, because they were not sure if the American audience would be familiar enough with David Beckham. They were actually going to change the name of the movie specifically for the U.S. release to Move It Like Mia, after women's professional soccer player Mia Hamm, as women's professional soccer was kind of on the rise at the time of the film's release, and it is even mentioned in the movie.
I'm just going to say that if they had called it Move It Like Mia, I would not have known what that meant either, because Soccer was not big enough in the US in the general public for me to know who Mia Hamm was at the time. I mean, now, yeah, I know who that is. But at the time, I would not have gotten that reference either. In fact, I would have gotten the David Beckham reference a little bit more because, I mean, you know, who didn't know Spice Girls? You know?
And the Spice Girls actually do get a mention in the movie, and two of them are on the soundtrack.
Yeah. So I will say that over the years, I have learned more about soccer to the point where I am kind of a low-key soccer fan at this point. My town has they're kind of on hiatus right now. I'm not going to get into it. We finally have a professional football club, and they were very good, and I'm very sad that they've gone on hiatus to the point where you could watch my town's football club on ESPN.
Yeah, we have one too here in Chicago. Chicago Fire. Shout out to Chicago Fire.
The fact that Chicago has a professional football club, not surprising. The fact that my tiny rural southern town has a professional football club, shocking. But, I will say, when I was going to look up this movie for the podcast, Disney Plus reminded me that there is a new season of Welcome to Wrexham, and so I binged that after I binged this film because I am very into that show. And, I do kind of keep up with a couple of British soccer teams now, football teams. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Since I first watched this movie, I did not understand basically any of the sports references when I first watched this movie, but watching it now, there's a joke about Keira Knightley's dad in this trying to explain to her mom the offside rule, which is notoriously confusing for people when they first get into soccer. And he's trying to explain it using the condiments on the table, like, okay, the soy sauce is this and the ketchup is that or whatever. And I did not really understand that, like what an important part of that and how difficult that is for most people to comprehend. However, that joke plays really well once you actually get into soccer a little bit. So it is very interesting for me, having just watched this as somebody who watched it initially because I was a fan of Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, because I really loved him in Velvet Goldmine. And I was like, oh, I'll watch this movie because he's in it. And I didn't know anybody else in the movie. And then now watching it back as someone who has watched a decent bit of soccer and stuff since, kind of fascinating.
So we talked about two of the leads. Let's kind of throw the third lead. Parminder Nagra plays our main character, Jess, who has this dream of playing professional soccer. She's obsessed with soccer. She has pictures of David Beckham all over her room. The movie starts with her having a dream of playing professional soccer right alongside David Beckham, much to her own mother's dismay, as her daughter is obsessed with, in her own words, a skin-headed white boy.
At the time, yes, David Beckham was basically completely a bald, shaved head and did look like, quote unquote, a skinhead.
Aerodynamics!
Yeah, it was just his style. As far as I know, he doesn't hold any kind of horrific views associated with, quote unquote, skinheads.
Yeah. It was, easier to shave it off than have hair flopping in your face while you're running down the field.
Yeah, now that he's retired, he's got a big old flop of hair,
So that's just his story. Keira Knightley plays Jules, the other side, our other lead, and her story is that she also is obsessed with soccer, and much to her own mother's dismay, but it's more of Jules's mother wants her to be more feminine, to grow up and get married, and a boy isn't going to like women with muscular definition. And hey, I saw your ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend. They weren't talking about soccer.
And how does she know that? I know lots of couples that talk about sports together, you know?
Yeah. But the point is that she just is, yeah.
Yeah, I will say that even though there is a slight difference in the cultural idea of what defines femininity between these two characters, this entire movie is built on two teenage girls, roughly, 18 years old, who both have to deal with their particular culture's expectations of femininity and how their dreams do not align with that. You have Jess, who comes from a Punjabi Sikh Indian background, okay? And her family has very conservative and strict ideas of what a woman in their culture should be. Jules's family, who are very much what we would probably call WASP in the US. I don't know if that term really applies in the UK, but that's how Americans would think of them, you know? They're kind of a middle class white Protestant family, you know? And even though they are not as conservative as a family, the mother wants Jules to, grow her hair out longer because she has a very short bob, kind of a boyish cut. And she does not dress overly feminine. You don't see her in skirts and dresses and stuff like that. She doesn't wear makeup a lot, that kind of thing.
Like the first scene of Jules that we see is her and her mother underwear shopping, and Jules's mother's trying to get her to buy more feminine underwear, and all Jules wants to do is buy a sports bra.
Well, and there is a very interesting through line for both of the main female characters where their mothers are very obsessed with enhancing the look of their bust in order to attract men. And yes, these characters are supposed to be roughly 18 years old, but that's still relatively young.
I mean, there's a part of the movie where Jess's mother says, "What? By the time I was your age, I was married."
Well, yeah, and in the culture that's not unusual. But I was thinking more about that there are conversations with both mother-daughter couples in this where the mothers specifically talk about their daughter's bust size and how it is too small and that they need to work on enhancing it.
I must increase my bust.
Yeah, and you were talking about the first scene with Jules. Not only is her mother trying to get her to buy more feminine underwear, her mother is specifically trying to get her to buy bras that have inserts to make her chest look bigger. And then later, as they're preparing Jess for her sister's wedding, the mother and the seamstress who is working on Jess's outfit joke about, her mosquito bites are going to look like juicy, juicy mangoes once I'm done with this outfit, which is just so disturbing and disgusting. And it would be disgusting enough if it was men saying this, but somehow as a woman, it really hits me much weirder when it is like their mothers saying this to them.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this very carefully. When it comes to quotes uplifting the patriarchy, if you want to go in that direction, sometimes the biggest the ones that are usually in favor of the quote patriarchy are sometimes women. They will, you have to do this for the male gaze. You're not going to get married. You're not going to have a man, unless you do X, Y, and Z. So sometimes there are some women that are just as guilty as continuing the patriarchy, if you want to call it that, as men are. And that is the vibe I get from
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, there are reasons, that like Serena Joy from Handmaid's Tale is such a character that hits home. And that character didn't come from nowhere. That character was based on a real woman, Phyllis Schlafly, who was the woman that is the reason that the Equal Rights Amendment never passed. Yes, it was a woman that is primarily the reason why we do not have a gender/sex equality amendment to the Constitution right now in the US. Okay? There are collaborators. You are correct. In any oppressive movement, you will find marginalized people who collaborate. So I'm not going to disagree with you. This is a perfect way of showing women who uphold these patriarchal systems to the detriment of themselves and the other women in their life, their daughters, their nieces, their best friends, etc. And I think the reason that it hit me so hard as a woman was that I have experienced similar things in my life, and it is too close to reality. It is one of the most realistic things in this movie to me personally. So that was one of the things. But I am going to say, you said something that kind of surprised you when we were discussing this off mic when you were watching this for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
That you said, for a movie about soccer, this does not have a lot of soccer in it. And I pointed out to you that if you are a person like me who is not super into quote unquote sports movies, I'm going to tell you, dear listener, this is not really a sports movie. This is a movie about having a dream and that dream seeming unattainable. We have talked several times over the course of this podcast about the tropes of the quote unquote sports movie, Mighty Ducks and stuff like that. Okay. That is not what this is. Agreed?
Yes.
We don't have any of those tropes, really.
The movie itself isn't necessarily listed as a sports movie. It's listed as a coming-of-age movie.
Yeah, it's like a coming-of-age comedy, And this is a movie about breaking gender barriers and familial dynamics and having dreams that seem unattainable and fighting for them. This is not like, the underdog team has to learn how to be more of a team and defeat the overpowered, overfunded team from the rich area or whatever. That's not what this is. This is very much a character study that uses soccer as a back. So if you were the type of person that was like, I'm not really into sports movies, I'm going to ask you to reconsider because this is not a traditional sports movie. It just happens to have people who play sports in it.
And you mentioned going after your dreams, even though, for lack of a better term, everyone's against you. We do see that in Jess's father, as it's later in the movie, but Jess's father even admits the reason he is very upset about Jess going after this soccer dream is that he too had a dream. He wanted to play cricket professionally, but when he moved to the UK, he was forbidden. He was ridiculed. They made fun of his turban. They shipped him out. They kicked him out of the club before he even held a bat. So he gave up on his dream of being a professional cricket player. His dreams were dashed, and he does not want that to happen to his daughter.
Yeah, when I first watched this movie, I was not as educated on the ethnic dynamics of the UK surrounding these communities. So a lot of this went over my head when I first watched this movie, but I do understand more about it now. And her father talks about how he was an exceptional cricket player when he lived in India. And when they moved to the UK, he really did want to continue that. He wanted to go pro in the UK, but because of the racism in the UK when they first moved, he was forbidden from, I mean, I'm not sure if it was like quote unquote illegal, but it was one of those things where he could not find a cricket team that would hire him. And I like the parts of this movie that deals with the kind of ethnic issues in the UK, because there is a point in the movie where Jess is on the field and she gets fouled by the opposing team. And when she kind of stands up for herself verbally to the girl who fouled her, the girl on the opposing team calls her a racial slur. It's not one that's common in the US, but it is very common in the UK, unfortunately. And when Jess hears that slur, she rightfully kind of loses it and pushes the girl and gets ejected from the game. She gets a red card and gets ejected because she is being violent toward another player, because the referee did not hear the other player use a racial slur against her. And so everybody thought she was overreacting to the foul.
The foul wasn't even called. That's another
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, the ref was just a sucky ref in the first place, but the ref also wasn't close enough, and neither were any of the coaches or the other players. So the only one that heard the racial slur was Jess herself. And later she tells her coach, played by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Joe is saying, okay, you got to rein it in. She fouled you, but you can't react like that. And Jess says, no, she called me this racial slur, but you wouldn't know how that feels, would you? Because you're white, basically. But Joe has to remind her that he is Irish and living in England. And yes, he would know what it's like to be discriminated against. Because even today, there is Irish discrimination in England. It's better than it was, but it's still there. And I do like the fact that they bring up this moment of solidarity.
Give the movie that credit. It doesn't shy away from the racism. Speaking of Joe, let's kind of go into his backstory. He was playing professionally at some point. His previous coach, which was his father, as he says, pushed him and pushed him and pushed him to the point where he ended up getting injured, and his career ended before it really could get started, because he's still very young. I had mentioned my own issues with the movie, and I'll get to them because we're not there yet. And you had mentioned that, logically speaking, he would be relatively young in comparison to how American sports athletes would be in the same scenario.
Yeah, let me explain this for, any Americans who do not know how the UK runs these football leagues, because I only recently learned this. In the US, if you are going to play a professional sport, you might start out, like unless you're an Olympic gymnast or something, okay? But like if you're going to play professional American football or professional soccer or professional basketball, etc., okay? The general path is you'll probably start out playing young as a kid in a recreation league. You might go on to your team in the public school system. You'll play in high school. You might get a scholarship in college. You'll play throughout college. And then once you graduate college, you will be drafted into a professional league. Okay? So we think in the US of an athlete turning pro maybe at, 20 years old. Okay? Maybe 19. Okay? In the UK with soccer leagues, this is not the way it is done. If you show talent at soccer as a child, you are frequently scouted as a child by professional football clubs. And most of the bigger ones basically run like kind of like a boarding school kind of thing, is my understanding. And I'm not an expert. Feel free to correct me if you know more about it. You know, our social media is open. We are always open to corrections. But my understanding is it's kind of like almost a boarding school system where you get recruited as a child and you go to school that the football club pays for, and you're with other, kids that are being trained. You spend part of your time in school like a normal kid, and then most of your time you spend being trained by this soccer club, football club, to hopefully become their next round of pros. And if you keep your grade decent, you don't really need like exceptional grades, but if you're good enough to like graduate, then you can kind of continue on. And as long as you're good at soccer, then, you should be able to be recruited by some sort of football club. Okay. And so I was pointing out to you Tuesday that Joe might not be as old as his background might suggest to an American audience, because it is very possible that he could have turned pro at like 16 years old under this system if he was really good. And also there's that bit of nepotism with the dad that might have played in. We don't know. We don't know the whole story. But if he came up in one of these systems, he could have turned pro very young and washed out by like 19. So it's very possible that he could be like 20 in this movie and have had technically a professional career and already washed out and, due to injury, and now be a coach for this women's team.
And the reason I went into that, I went into that, and might as well throw that out now. Part of the story of the movie is that there's this little love triangle between Jess, Jules, and Joe. Pretty much as soon as Joe enters the picture, Jess is telling Jules, "Oh, Joe's kind of cute." Said, yeah, he's cute, but he's off limits because he's our coach. He could lose his job if he's caught messing around with one of his players. And then later in the movie, it looks like, Jess and Joe have a moment, and it looks like they're about to kiss, and Jules just says, you backstabber, and just storms out. You knew he was off limits. You knew I fancied him. How dare you?
Say that my problem with Jess is that she's a good person. She's a decent person. But boy, does she not know how to take a hint. It is so obvious that Joe is very uncomfortable at any point when she tries to show him any sort of attention on that level. I mean, you can see like every muscle in his body flinch,
And it could be, another part of the thing that did make me uncomfortable is, as it's mentioned in the movie, the power dynamic. He's their coach. They're the players. It's still a bit of an ick. For me, it was originally the age, and then we talked about the age thing. So even if they are closer in age than I thought, it's still the ick because he's their coach. There's a power dynamic there, and Jules even points that out. He's the coach. You can't be messing around with the coach. Joe even says, I'm your coach. We can't be doing this. So it's like, it's mentioned in the movie that now I don't know what Joe's official reason for being uncomfortable is. It could be the power dynamic. I'm your coach. You're the player. We can't be doing this. Maybe, he doesn't know how he feels about her. Maybe he, by the end of the movie, he seems to be okay with it simply because I'm not your coach anymore. But who knows?
Well, the thing is that the one time that they almost did cross a line, the scene, that you just described where they almost kissed, both of them were very drunk, the way I understand the movie. It wasn't an issue of one of them taking advantage of the other. They were both very intoxicated. It wasn't like one of them was sober and one of them was, granted, Joe seems to be slightly more with it because Jess is not used to drinking. We know she comes from a family that they do not really drink alcohol. This may be the first time she's ever drunk alcohol. We don't know. Okay? So she's not handling it as well as he is, but it is very obvious that he is also drunk. Okay? So we know that they are both making a mistake. And when they are sober, neither of them is attempting to make a move on the other. They both understand that boundary, even though there are feelings there. And that's why I give them a little bit of leeway, as far as the writers, because it isn't until after he is no longer in a position of power over her that the two of them kind of are like, okay, maybe we can explore this. So that's my view of it. I understand if other people have different feelings on it, but that is why it has never bothered me as much as it may bother other people.
To go further into that story, it's, Jules kind of overreacting in that moment because, as she always said, Joe's off limits, but it's also, you knew I liked him. How dare you go after him? Now, granted, yeah, all three of them are drunk. But this becomes a big issue with the second half of the movie is these two kind of not speaking to each other over that incident.
Yeah, and this kind of works as sort of a vague Pride episode too. Happy Pride Month.
We're actually recording this on the first day of Pride.
Yeah. So the thing is that there are several queer themes in this film, and one of them is that Jules's mother gets the idea that Jules is a lesbian who is in love with Jess because she overhears Jules and Jess fighting about this almost kiss that Jess had with Joe. But the mother does not hear the entire context. She does not realize that they are fighting over a man. She thinks that they are fighting over a broken heart between the two of them.
You broke my heart, Jess.
Yeah. You don't know what love is, that kind of thing. And so the mother thinks well, this is why she hasn't been interested in makeup and chasing after boys and stuff. Obviously, she's a lesbian, And it leads to some really hilarious moments where, Jules's mom crashes Jess's sister's wedding and says how dare you play with my daughter's affections and stuff like that, And of course she calls her a lesbian, and then some of Jess's family thinks she's calling her Lebanese and says, no, she's Indian, she's Punjabi,
I thought she was a Pisces.
Yeah, I thought she was Pisces. Yeah. Yeah, it's so many good jokes about that. And there's a joke in there where Jess needed some fancy shoes for the wedding, and Jules loaned Jess a pair of her mother's shoes. And when Jules's mom sees Jess wearing her shoes, she takes the shoes from Jess and then leaves the wedding. And there's a whole discussion among Jess's family afterwards of white people are crazy. Why did she just come into the wedding and steal Jess's shoes? Because they have no context for the fact that was actually that woman's shoes, you know?
I mean, they're not wrong.
They're not wrong. White people are crazy, and I say that as one of the whitest white people, yeah.
While the movie is kind of advertised as a soccer movie, all the trailers I remember of this movie was just showing all of the soccer scenes. The heart of the movie is really Jess's sister, Pinky, and her wedding. Right at the beginning, we see that Pinky is engaged to a man. They're setting up the wedding. A good portion of the beginning of the movie is their dad decorating the house in lights so they can have like parties there for the wedding. And it really comes down, like anyone who's getting married in a family knows, if you're the younger sibling or younger cousin or whatever, the question comes to you, when are you getting married? Much to Jess's own dismay.
Yeah, it is interesting to me that so much of this movie revolves around a wedding that is not even for one of the main characters.
It is weird. I mean, at the midpoint of the movie, the wedding is called off because the fiance catches Jess and Jules horsing around, and they think, oh, Jess is messing around with a white boy.
Because Jules has very short hair. She dresses kind of boyishly, tomboyishly, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
And they're just messing around because they just got, they're soccer players, so they're messing around. Nothing romantic about it. They're just horsing around. And they think, oh, Jess is making out with a white boy. So, the fiance ends up breaking it off with Pinky because he doesn't want to be part of a family that has, your sister's messing around with white folk. I ain't touching that with a 10-foot pole.
It is interesting how they explore various cultural biases, I guess, on all sides of this. And it is, neither of us are the people to speak to any of that cultural norm, for good or ill. That's not our place. We're just noting that it is part of the plot of the film, is that these families do have an expectation that their children will marry within their ethnicity, and you have your own opinion of that, dear listener. I will not put my opinion on it. We are just noting that is a plot point in the movie.
Yeah, in the movie, there's a part where they're in the locker room and they talk about this stuff. And Jess tells the other team is that, if I brought home a white boy, my parents would freak. A black boy, they'd freak. A Muslim, they'd disown me.
Yeah, she is expected to marry an Indian man, preferably a Punjabi Sikh, but if not a Punjabi Sikh, just an Indian man.
Her mother says, why don't you marry that boy, Tony? Her best friend, Tony, which we haven't mentioned in the movie yet. We see him pretty much at the beginning of the movie. He's also a soccer player. They have a lot in common. They both like David Beckham. And by the midpoint of the movie, we find out that Tony really likes David Beckham. Happy Pride.
Did we mention Happy Pride Month? Yeah. There are some interesting queer themes in this movie, and one of them is gay best friend. She has a gay best friend, and she didn't realize it. We get a lot of hints to this throughout the early part of the movie, in the fact that we had not mentioned yet that in the first part of the movie, until Jules kind of sees her playing in the park and scouts Jess for her soccer team, the only way that Jess is able to play soccer is with some of the Indian boys in her community. So there are Indian guys her own age who are very into soccer, and they hold the informal games in the local park. And she is the only woman in this group. They don't even have enough people for a full team, It's just like 5 friends.
And that's how Jules notices Jess, because she's just jogging in the park and then just sees Jess play and says, oh, I need her on my team.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we get that Tony is different from the other guys in this group is that the other guys in the group are very much like what we would call now gym bros. You know, they're very much manosphere types. They are constantly saying misogynistic things to Jess. They're insulting her. They're making very derogatory comments about her body. They're making derogatory comments about how she would be a much better soccer player if she were a guy, you know.
Later in the movie, when the guys actually go to one of her games, they straight up says that the entire team look like lesbians.
Yeah, and Tony is the only one that ever stands up for her, including at that game where he looks at the, you know, misogynistic dude bros and says, can't you just see them as footballers? In other words, why are you making this all about gender? Why can't you just see them as people who play the same sport that you are passionate about?
See them as athletes.
Yeah, just as athletes, you know, into the same thing that you are. And all of the other guys just look at him and immediately laugh in his face. Like it's the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard. You know, anytime the other guys in the group insult Jess, Tony compliments her. He does not give her compliments that are like flirty or flattering in that sense. He gives her compliments on her skill. You know, it's not like, oh, you look good in that outfit. It's very much like, oh, your footwork in that last play was very exceptional. You know, that kind of thing. It's very obvious that he sees her as a fully rounded person, an athlete, a good friend. He's not looking down on her, but he's also not attempting to be with her, you know? He does sort of, at one point in the movie, do his best to be a good friend. And since he does not feel capable of coming out in such a conservative culture, there is one point at the end of the movie where he attempts to propose to Jess in front of her family in order to allow her to live her dream. Because in the culture, if she has the permission of a father or a husband, her dreams would be more acceptable. So he says, I want us to get married, but on the condition that she is allowed to go to college wherever she wants, because he knows that she's gotten a offer for a soccer scholarship in the US and that her parents wouldn't let her go, but if her fiance wanted her to do that, then she would be allowed. You know, which, by the way, what a good friend.
Yeah.
Jess refuses his offer though, and you know, comes clean with her parents.
Because she's been lying to her parents for the entire movie up to this point. Her parents don't even know that she's playing. They don't know that she's on the team. She lied to her parents to get on an airplane to go play in Germany. She's had her sister cover for her while she does all of this. So she's just tired of the secrets and the lies, and she wants to come clean. But at least she didn't say anything about Tony being gay. So that is the good friend aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it's never your place to out somebody else, you know, especially if you know they are not generally out.
I guess another quote, beat, I guess you want to call it that, of part of the movie is, once her mother sees her soccer uniform, she kind of freaks. One, because it's showing a little too much skin, again, part of the culture, but also Jess has a scar on her leg that she's very ashamed of. It's a burn scar. She says that when she was a kid, her mother tried to teach her to cook. It went wrong, and she burned her leg. So she has this burn scar on her leg. And it doesn't last very long as a plot point in the movie, but I will give the director and the makeup people enough credit that every time she's in those shorts, you do see that burn scar on her leg.
Yeah, there is good continuity with that. It also leads to one of the best jokes in the movie, where she is telling about how she got the scar, and it turns out that she had been left home alone because of her parents needing to do, various things, or her dad was working late and, whatever. And so she was attempting to make herself beans on toast when she was little, and she was, well, she wasn't entirely alone. Her sister was there, but her sister didn't realize she was trying to cook. She went to get the beans off of the burner, and she caught her trouser leg on fire, she says. And she screamed, and her sister came running from the other room, and was able to put out the fire, but it left her very scarred. And she's telling Joe this, and Joe says, "That's horrible." And Jess says, "I know. It put me off beans and toast for life." Which I just love as like a gallows humor kind of, dark humor kind of thing. You know me, dark humor is my favorite, so I had forgotten about that line, and I laughed so hard when I heard it.
There is a bit of a sports trope in this movie, in that when they're doing that game in Germany, the final shot of the game is a penalty shot, and Jess has to do this penalty shot, and she botches the penalty shot. It gets caught, and they lose the game. And that kind of becomes her kind of, I don't know if you want to call it definitely not the A plot, and definitely not the B plot, probably the C plot, is her constantly trying to get a penalty shot in. She's at home, she's kicking the ball across laundry to try to make this penalty shot, to quote, bend it like Beckham, the way David Beckham would seemingly bend his leg during those kind of shots. And yeah, that's why it's called that. But just to be, because it's a sports movie, that's our through line here. And then again, at the end of the movie, the big championship game is, it comes down to a penalty shot. And Jess actually gets the penalty shot win. Yay, they win. But again, the soccer stuff isn't really as important as everything else in this movie. Like we said, most of the movie centers around this wedding, of how, Jess has to, work at her sister's wedding. Her actions caused the couple to break up. They get back together. One of the big, again, it's another one of these kind of tropes where the date of the wedding happens to be the same day as the big game. And there's this big scout from America that's coming in to scout the team. So what do you do? Why do all of these kind of movies, especially like coming of age movies, have these double booked moments? How many of those have we seen so far?
I have lost track.
So like she has to make a choice. Does she skip her sister's wedding, or does she skip the big game? And she ultimately decides to skip the big game because her family would never forgive her if she missed her sister's wedding. But she's there and she's completely miserable because, hey, she's a footballer. She wants to play. It's her dream. But, good guy, her dad, like we said, he also had this dream. He sees his daughter completely miserable at the wedding. I just love how he handles the whole thing. It's that you're completely miserable, and I don't want my daughter miserable in photographs of this wedding and videos of this wedding. If she leaves now, she can still make the second half. But as soon as you get back, I want all smiles and all photographs and all video, because I want my daughter to be happy. Which, good guy, that dad. He's just doing what makes his daughter happy.
Yeah. I am going to say, it just hit me that in the sense that this is not a traditional sports movie, and it is more about breaking gender barriers and achieving dreams. This movie would play out basically the same way if Jess had wanted to be a drummer in a rock band, or I don't know, pick a kind of male-dominated profession that conservative family would probably not approve of, and insert that instead of playing soccer, and the movie would play almost identically,
I mean, it's like we've seen it with when we did the Freaky Friday, the remake. It's the big battle of the bands, but it's also mom's wedding. Can't do both. What do we do? Or Turning Red, where it's the night of the big Four Town concert, but it's also this ceremony that needs to happen. We've seen it so many times, so many ways, in so many movies that, yeah, this would have been more or less almost the same thing without the soccer aspect.
Yeah.
But they're going with soccer because it's a UK movie. Soccer is the number one sport in the world, without, not counting the US. So, at the time, David Beckham was pretty much a rock star in the soccer world, in the football world. So it would make sense why they would do that.
Yeah.
And, like I said, a big part of it is, at least for Jules, is the rising women's professional soccer league in the States. And, we do see her and Jules watching some American women's soccer games, one featuring Mia Hamm.
Yeah.
Tony makes the call that he's gonna, pretend to marry Jess so she could live her dream and take the scholarship that the scout has offered. Both Jess and Jules have been offered this scholarship to the States because the scout was impressed by both of them at the big game. But finally, it's Jess's father that steps up. I allowed Jess to go to the game because I realized I let my bullies win. They pushed me out of playing cricket, and I let them. Who lost? Me. They didn't lose. They got to live their dreams, and I gave up mine. And he doesn't want his daughter to go through that. He wants his daughter to fight for her dream. And so he gives his blessing to Jess to move to the States, to go to university in the States, and to fight for her dream of playing professional soccer. And now that she's doing this, her and Joe have a moment. It looks like they're going to go somewhere. Hey, I'm not your coach anymore. We can actually be together. But Jess says no. Mostly because, it's going to be distance. And she doesn't know if her living in the States and him still living in the UK, if their relationship would even be able to last. But next day we get to the airport and everyone's going out and they're about, the flight's about to board. This movie came out in 2002, but was clearly filmed in 2001.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
So yeah, this is definitely a pre 9/11 world because people can just walk up to the gate. Remember that? I remember those days where anyone can just walk into the airport and walk up to the gate.
I'm going to be honest with you. I only went on one airplane trip prior to 9/11. And maybe there were people who were like just hanging out at the gate and stuff, but I didn't personally experience it with my group because the only people who were there in my group were the people going on the trip. But, I've seen it in lots of movies and stuff.
Done it when, relatives flying in. Well, let's meet them at the airport, and we just go up to the gate that their flight was coming in. Hey, how you doing? Uncles, cousins, whatever. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, after like once I started flying by myself. People would pick me up at baggage claim. That's kind of the most inside anybody would ever get.
Yeah. But yeah, Joe goes to Jess one more time before she gets on her flight and tells him that he's been offered a job to coach one of the men's teams, but he's turned it down because he wants to continue coaching women's soccer. In his words, the Yanks can't have all my good players.
Hey.
And in the moment they have their kiss, they have their moment. Yay. As Jules notices that David Beckham himself is actually in the airport for some reason. He's just walking through. Because we need an actual cameo from David Beckham in the movie named after David Beckham.
Yeah, and it's not even David Beckham, it's a body double. Although David Beckham appears in like footage of gameplay and in the posters and stuff. But yeah, when they see, oh my god, it's Posh and Bex up there. Those are body doubles. That's not really them. Yeah.
But, I will say that Posh and Sporty both have songs on the soundtrack. I mentioned that before. But there's a nice little gag that Jules's mom says, there's a reason that Sporty Spice is the only Spice Girl that doesn't have a man, which wasn't even correct. I believe she was married at the time of the movie.
Yeah, I think so.
But the final scene of the movie after they get on the flight is Jess's dad playing cricket again. Obviously, he's a little old to go pro, but, he finally picks up the bat again and then he starts playing cricket with the family, including Joe. So, Joe is kind of seen as part of the family now.
That probably angers Pinky's in-laws.
Yeah. But yeah, there have been talks of a sequel to the movie. As recently as last year, 2025, there's been talks of a sequel to the movie, potentially for the film's 25th anniversary in 2027, potentially for the 2027 World Cup. I don't know where you would go as a sequel. Would it be just another young girl looking to be a soccer star? Would it be, Jess maybe retiring from professional soccer to coach a team of her own? I don't know, but there have been talks of a Bend It Like Beckham 2. I mean, we just got Devil Wears Prada 2, so everything's on the table. We're about to get Toy Story 5. So nothing's off the table at this point.
I will say that at one point there were rumors that Keira Knightley wanted there to be a more lesbian-focused sequel to this. And I have even read in some places, although I cannot verify it, I haven't been able to find any direct quotations or videos, but it is a common rumor in the LGBTQ community that Keira Knightley has said for years that she thought Jess and Jules should have ended up together at the end of the movie.
I'm not against it.
Well, the thing is that as much as I love Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Keira Knightley and Parminder Nagra had much better chemistry than Parminder Nagra and Jonathan Rhys-Meyers did. And I say that as a person who went into this movie only knowing Jonathan Rhys-Meyers.
I mean, they could do it. A lot can happen in 25 years. So who's to say that a potential sequel couldn't already start with them together and whatnot? Again, don't know if the sequel will actually happen. Again, it's been about a year since there's been any discussions about it. But who knows? So, Kiki, does Bend It Like Beckham have the magic?
I would say yes. I was very surprised at how well this movie held up.
Seeing it for the first time, I am also going to say yes. I actually did enjoy the more coming of age aspects of the movie. I'm very impressed that they did not shy away from the racism angles of the movie. The movie really is about going against culture norms and the expectation of family to pursue a dream. And it just happens to be that this movie was soccer.
I will say that one of the reasons why it didn't shy away from that is that we haven't mentioned the writer-director of this, Gurinder Chadha, who is herself a Punjabi Sikh of Indian origin. So most of her films deal with the Indian diaspora living in the UK and their culture and the prejudice they face and, you know, how they do or do not integrate into society, you know, on that level, etc. Bend It Like Beckham is kind of along the lines of most of her work, and I don't want to downplay that, and we hadn't really brought that up yet, so.
Mm. But yeah, I think the movie does have the magic. Yeah, definitely. And I do recommend it. If you're in World Cup mode and you're looking for a soccer movie to watch, yeah, this is not the kind of movie that you would watch saying, I want to watch a soccer movie. But if you just want to watch a movie that about someone who's going to do whatever it takes to achieve their dream, then yeah, this is definitely the kind of movie you want to watch. And yeah, it definitely has the magic. Yeah. As for next week, I already mentioned it. Toy Story 5 is coming out about a week after this episode's release. So on that, we are going to be talking about the most recent Toy Story movie, Toy Story 4. And I believe, Kiki, this is going to be a first watch for you.
We talked about it the last time we did a Toy Story movie. I watched the first two and then kind of dropped off. So yeah, this one's gonna be a first watch, and I'm looking forward to it. I've been meaning to get to it, and it keeps not happening.
Yeah, so come back next week for Toy Story 4, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social. And new episodes are available at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic. Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.